going now. All right, so you're going to put parentheses for the variable, and you square it. What goes inside those parentheses? X plus h is inside the parentheses. Too many times I see x squared plus h. Now what is x plus h squared?
X plus h times x.
You have to do the FOIL process. You can't just square the first, square the last, and say it's going to be x squared plus h squared. When you do that, you get x squared plus xh plus hx, which those are like terms, plus h squared, and your answer becomes x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So either one of these two could stand as the answer. More than likely, they will probably show it expanded out. Questions? Go quick. Please. Okay, here's one. Try this one. I have it now where you have something besides just a number that you're going to substitute in. Remember, to solve this problem, what you're going to do is you're going to find your variable here, which is the same as what's right there. And you're going to replace it with what's in parentheses right there. So when you do that, you're going to have -5. J is your variable, so you put parentheses. What are you going to put inside those parentheses? U minus 8. So we put in U minus 8, and if you use the distributive property, you get 5U plus 40. Now you could put that is what H of U minus 8 is. I rewrote the problem right there. I mentioned that's what that was. I said this right here was asking the same question as if I asked it right here before. If, that's what it is, find that. So if h of j is equal to -5j, find h of u minus 8. You know they're the same thing, the same function, because they are both h. If I used a different letter, I'd be referring to a different function, which is something else we're going to get into yet today. The other reason I know that, and I don't know if I should record this. So don't worry about that little part right there. So the question is, if g of y is equal to 6y, my question is to find g of -8x. Answer. -48x. You're going to take your g of y function, which is 6y. In place of y, you put parentheses. And then in parentheses, you're going to put -8x. So you get -48x. Calculate this one. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your h of k function. That's just once it does come up. That's, oh, there we go. You take your h of k function, and in place of k, you put -4a. So you have -5 times -4a. A lot of you are just doing that mentally, and yes, you do get 20a for an answer. Positive 20a for an answer. What if I told you this? Can you find that for me? guys, because I made a comment because you're laughing and giggling and whatever. Okay, here we go. So what you do is you take where x is at, and you're going to replace that with, oh, it's not going to go back to the highlight. You're going to replace it with what's right there. So when you rewrite it, what does it look like? I said you put the parentheses where the variables are at. And in place of those parentheses or the variable, you're going to replace it with what's right here.
I'm on the right track. I don't know if I did it right though.
How do you, what does this x plus h squared mean?
X squared plus 2x plus h.
Yep, when you get down to it, it's x squared plus 2xh plus h squared, but it means you take it times itself. So you FOIL, you multiply the first times each other, you multiply the outer, which is x plus h, you multiply the inner, which is x plus h, and you multiply the last together, which is h squared. This second one, you're going to take positive 4 and use the distributive property, which is 4x plus 4h. And then you have that last term, which is minus 3. So your 3 terms that you start with right here have turned into these terms right here. Now, are there like terms I can group together? We can group those two together. So your final answer is x squared plus 2xh plus h squared plus 4x plus 4h minus 3. Ready for another one?
It's right here. There you go. All right, join class and don't cause a seat, please. All you gotta do.
There you go. All right, so here's what we have. We come to f of x, and we're going to replace the x with what value is right here. When you do that, here's what it looks like. Well, I'm going to do this. You have 2x minus 3x squared plus x cubed. All right, what is in place of the x? X plus h. So I'm going to replace those x's with x plus h. All right, so far. Okay, if I look at the first term, I use the distributive property, and you get 2x plus 2h. The second term, which is right here. By now, have you figured out what x plus h squared is?
X squared plus 2x h plus h squared.
That's going to give us negative 3 times x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. We've multiplied that out a couple of times now. Is it okay if I just put that there?
Yeah.
Now the question comes into that last term there, which says it is plus x plus h cubed. That means that you're like, oh, we got to do this 3 times? I mean, we have talked about what this gives you. What does that give you when you multiply 2 of them together?
Oh,
Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that so it's just these last 2 right here. So what that gives you is it gives you x plus h. And then when I multiply 2 of them together, that gives you x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. Then what you need to do is you take the x and multiply times each one. And then you take the h and multiply by each one. So it's going to give you this long answer here. Huge answer. So we start out and you have 2x plus 2h. And I'm going to distribute that negative 3 through. So you get negative 3x squared minus 6xh minus 3h squared. Question on that part. Now what happens, I better do this because I think this is too far up. Come on, computer. Okay, now I'm going to distribute. What is x times x squared? X cubed. What is x times 2x h? 2x squared h. And x times h squared is xh squared. Now I got to take the h and multiply it through. What does that give you? H times x squared is hx squared. H times 2xh is 2xh squared, and the last one is h cubed. Now you're that far.
Oh my God.
Add like terms. Oh wow, yeah.
Some of them are even like the same. There's a lot of difference.
Do you see any that are
I
same?
don't see it.
Any of them just x besides the first one? No. I think there are some that are the same, and you have to look in the red for that.
Yeah, I think it's x squared is 2x.
What we notice is here's an x squared h, and here's an x squared h. Right there?
Right there. Right.
Then you get the xh squared, and this is x h squared.
It's different because
The different exponents.
Exponents are different letters.
Letters, different variables. So what we end up with now is 2x plus 2h. Then we have this minus 3x squared minus 6xh minus 3h squared. And what's in red simplifies into x cubed plus 3x squared h plus 3xh squared plus h cubed.
what is the purpose of that? Why can't you just leave it in the simpler?
All of that right there
Yeah.
is what it simplifies into.
That is not simple.
That's
No,
not-
that should be
that's
expanded.
That is
What makes it look like it's really complicated instead of simplified is I use different colors.
Yeah. So long.
It is long. So there's lots of work you can get into when you start substituting in x plus h. But hopefully you realize is that you put the parentheses for the variable and substitute what is in parentheses in the second part. The worksheet you guys had was a lot simpler than this. But you probably will see on like an ACT test, I would not be surprised if you see one just like your bell ringer, like this.
Yeah, I saw that.
This you could probably see on the ACT test. So I wanted to point out what happens when you substitute in that x plus h. Otherwise, what the x plus h, when you start getting into problems that deal with this, you're starting to get into pre-calculus, or in what we have as pre-calculus, but it's calculus based. And that gets into when you are looking for, you know how to find the slope of that, right? How do you find the slope of that? Rise over run, and it's a constant, correct? But what about the slope of this? It's a parabola, and if you were to think about what you find when you're finding the slope of a parabola, because you can't just find a single slope, it's not the same, it's not constant throughout. It changes, and as it changes, you think about a tangent line. A tangent line is going to be, for simplification purposes, a line that touches that curve in just one spot. So I look at this, and if I were to let my fingers be the spot that it's touching, and if I were to take that line and move it around your parabola, what do you notice happens? What's over here? From here to here, what's your slope? Negative slope. Do you see that?
Yeah.
What happens right here? What slope is up? 0. And then as I trace it up over here, what's your slope become? Positive. So your slope is continually changing. So to find the slope of something that has a curve, which is most things that happen in life, if you look at any of the science information, data that's probably given to you, anything in the social sciences, population, diversity, things like that, you're going to get a curve. Even if you talk about in industry, you're going to get a curve in your graph. And what you do when you look at that to find the slope, it's known as the derivative. And that's the key concept when you're dealing with calculus, is the derivative. And you're finding this an equation for the slope of the tangent line. And the definition of the derivative is the limit. It's the limit as x approaches, actually they say h, delta x or h. So it is the limit as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. Yeah, wow. And that h is a delta x. If you know what you're going into and it has anything at college that has to deal with business calculus or calculus, which is even ag, if you're going into ag, then you're going to be working with this. And that stuff you can bet next year when you're taking, if you take pre-calc. Pre-calc here is basically calculus. I've had some seniors that want to drop trig and they say, well, they say I only need pre-calculus. And it's like, okay, pre-calculus for colleges, their pre-calculus is college algebra, which is the trig book. Pre-calc here is a half a semester of calculus at college at a slow pace so you understand what you're doing. There's a lot about, a big part of calculus is algebra. You probably have to have college algebra. Is it algebra 1? Really? Where are you going? Okay. You should probably take trig. Everybody says that, but that's because it's different. It's the same green book you're in now. We're in. You will be fine. Okay, what if I give you this problem right here? What if I told you g of n was equal to n squared plus 4 plus 2n, h of n is equal to negative 3n plus 2. These are different functions, that's why I put them in different color. And now I ask you to find h plus g of 10.
Did you take the blue plus the green?
There's two different things you could do. One thing you could do is you could add these two together and then put 10 in. But the way that I read this function right here when it says h plus g of 10, I would find it this way. I would find what is h of 10, and I'm going to add to it whatever g of 10 is. That's easier. So what you do is put 10 in here. So I'm going to put a 10 right here. What's that give you for an answer? Negative 28.
Oh, the 10 goes substitutes in?
And I'm going to put 10 into this problem for the n. So I put 10 in there. 10 squared is 100 plus 4 plus 20, and you get 124. And then what they're asking you to do is take negative 28 plus 124. What does that give you for an answer? Negative, oops, positive, positive, 96, 96, 98.
So you substitute your red
96.
in- You substitute your red in for the purple.
Here's what you're going to do. You're going to separate that into two functions, h of 10 and g of 10. H of 10 means in place of this n right there, you're going to put a 10. And then in place of the n, you put a 10. Did it make it too messy by me trying to write over the n?
No,
Substitute it into both functions and add them together. So what do you think would happen if I gave you this particular problem? What do you think if I told you, oh, I'm done. What if I told you f of x is equal to f of x is equal to 4x minus 3, g of x is equal to x cubed plus 2x. And then I come over here and I tell you to find what is f minus g of 4. Now this is different than when we were saying what is f of x plus h, because what was in parentheses is the back is x plus h. Here, it's your functions that are in parentheses there. So this notation right here means this. Take f of 4 and subtract g of 4. So what is f of 4? I'm going to take the f function, and I'm going to, in place of x, put what? 4. What's that give you an answer of? 13. Then I'm going to find what is g of 4. So I'm going to take my g function, which is x cubed, and I'm going to add 2 times x to it. What is x? 4. What is 4 cubed plus 2 times 4? 64 plus 8 is 72. Now, what's the question asked me to do, though? You take the F1, which is 13, and you subtract the G1, which is 72. What do you get when you subtract that?
Yeah, yeah, me. Or minus 56.
I think I was.
That's negative.
72 minus 10 is 62, minus another 3 is 59.
I don't get 56. I don't know how you got that. Because I thought it was something.
You actually multiply the 2 and the 3, and then you
Oh, I subtracted 8. And then subtracted 7. I still don't.
Let me ask you what this means. If I told you g of n was equal to n squared plus 4, we just put these numbers in before, plus 2n, and h of n is equal to negative 3n plus 2. What does this notation mean? You multiply them together. So 1. We were putting variables in before. So that's a 1. So if I were to calculate, what is g of 1? This means g of 1 times h of 1. So if I put 1 in there, what do you get for an answer? 1 squared is 1 plus 4 plus 2. So I get 7. What is h of 1? If I put 1 in, you get negative 3 plus 2, which is negative 1. You multiply them together and you get an answer of negative 7. You see what the notation is asking you for. Guess what the other type of notation is? For this one, what if I asked you this? What is g over h of n? This is saying I want to take g of n and divide by h of n. What is g of n? What did we say g of n was? G of 1. Sorry, maybe I should change that to a 1.
Negative 7. Or no, it'll be 1 to that.
Let's do 1 since we've already got 1. So what is g of 1 divided by h of 1? 7 over negative 1, which has a value of negative 7. So you have different notations, which either means multiply, divide, add, or subtract. I need you to do. You gotta listen to what the instructions are, otherwise you have to put a whole bunch, because there's front, back, and here. All you have to do for Monday is I want you to do this first column going down. You need to skip, don't do any more. There is one in this column that I have not talked about yet. Just do the first column. Just do the first column down, which means the odds 1 through 11. And if you hurry, you can go get one of those off the floor.
Yeah, I'm gonna mess it up until I'm not. We have to write out our work.
Good luck to you.
Just write down the answer.
I have to find, because if you get into Schoology right now, and I need to do this weekend. If you get into Schoology, you're going to have the a new geometry course. You get into Schoology, into geometry. I think you have a new course. So I gotta go into the archives and I gotta pull out first semester one so I can open it back up. So I'll have to do it.
You got access first?
I could just switch it over.
I'm
I don't think it carries it over. You don't have the little red one anymore. I have a red icon.
No. Geometry, no materials have an access course.
Yep. So it, yes. If you would like me to check any of them, I do have the answers completed, so you can come ask and I could tell you if you are correct. Or I could pre-check it, and I just recorded all of this stuff.